Hey everybody, Nick here. Welcome to set. We are back on the set of my feature film called The Game of Life. I'm not going to tell you exactly what this room is meant to be, but we've been shooting most of this film in my home in rooms that I've just dressed to be the sets of what we need for each scene. And there's about 30 pages left in the film left to shoot. About 20 of them are going to be in this space. So I've been thinking a lot about it and about how to make it kind of the best it can be. And right now I'm shooting this piece to camera on something else that's going to be joining us for those remaining 30 pages. This is the Xelmus Apollo anamorphic A set. It consists of 3 lenses, a 40mm, 60, and 100. They're all 2x stretch full-frame anamorphic lenses, and I've talked about this set before using a set that I borrowed from a colleague, but this set is mine, and it really changed how I think about anamorphic lenses and cinematography and visual storytelling more generally. This particular set surprised me in a few ways, and that's kind of what this video is going to be about. But backing up for a moment, I'm a very technical sort of creative person. Part of what draws me to cinematography is how the very precise use of these very technical tools helps craft a piece of emotional, subjective, artistic expression. And I try to always remain firmly rooted in fact when learning about, evaluating, and using these tools. You won't see me describe characteristics of any piece of equipment using primarily emotional language, or, by rubbing my fingers together, that old, oh, this lens does something that just can't be put into words, all the things can be put into words. Now, of course, the images these tools produce are meant to be emotional. The artist using the tools can feel emotional about them, but the tools themselves are not comprised of emotions. They're made of glass, metal, silicon, and plastic. I'm very particular about understanding how things actually work and which mechanisms actually create the emotions we do feel when we use the tools and consume the artwork. And that leads me nicely into the subject of anamorphic lenses generally. So much has been said about anamorphic lenses, and far too often it's in that kind of hand-wavy emotional language that I try to avoid. And when people do try to make technical explanations, they're often dead wrong. Things like an anamorphic lens is special because it has the field of view of a wider lens with the compression of a longer lens. Or anamorphic lenses have larger bokeh because it's stretched vertically and that does a better job of separating the subject from the background, creating that 3D pop. Both of those things are either dead wrong or at least 80% wrong. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all the misconceptions and false statements. Instead, I'm going to focus on what the lenses actually do, and most specifically what this set of lenses does and why I've completely fallen in love with it. But if you really want to dig into anamorphic lenses as a topic, definitely check out the Scope series of videos by Nicholas Moldenhauer at Media Division, as well as Chizofraden's anamorphic channel. Both of those are linked in the description. Those guys do outstanding work, and their videos are an insanely valuable and free resource for anyone wanting to learn more about the subject. And for anyone who loves cinema lenses generally, I cannot recommend strongly enough the Cine Lens Manual by Jay Holben and Christopher Probst. This is a must-read, must-own, and we'll come back to it in a minute. But generally, an anamorphic lens squeezes an image horizontally so that the sensor or film can capture a wider field of view. That's explicitly what it was used for back in the 1960s and forward to enable the recording and projection of widescreen formats. These days, you don't need an anamorphic lens to create a wider field of view or wide aspect ratio. Today's lenses and cameras have enough resolution and focal length options that you can just shoot spherical all day and crop to whatever format you like. It's done all the time. What's interesting is the artifacts that anamorphic lenses produce, and that because those lenses were used so extensively throughout cinema history, that the attributes became associated with a cinematic look and are somewhat baked into the public subconscious. Things like the oval bokeh, the barrel distortion, the single-axis breathing in some cases, focus fall-off, and of course, the striking flares. Now, I'm not someone who generally pines for the look of old films, things like gate weaves, cigarette burns, the classic look of celluloid. I don't care about these things generally. I wholeheartedly embrace digital acquisition and display. Dolby Vision for theaters and OLED panels for home viewing. These things are absolutely incredible and have made the consumption of visual entertainment better than it has ever been at any point in history. And similarly, I embrace modern lenses. Clean, sharp, fast, high-resolution tools which can create high-fidelity records in brilliantly vivid color with focus as selective and specific as you choose to be. My Desiofilm Aural Primes are the perfect example of this. They remain my tool of choice when I go for a clean look, and they're just fantastic, generally. But I do still love some of those anamorphic things. The oval bokeh is neat. The barrel distortion can be really nice. Striking blue flares can take my breath away. But I have to be specific here. Most anamorphic lenses don't interest me all that much. Just being anamorphic or vintage, those aren't things I tend to care about. But there are some lenses with such a rich and storied history that they've become a part of the movie landscape just by virtue of their ubiquity. You put a lens like a Cooke Speed Panker on a camera, it's going to evoke certain feelings just because of all the content you've consumed from movies and TV shows shot on those lenses. And perhaps no single lens has had a more significant impact on the landscape of film than the Panavision C-Series anamorphics. That look has basically defined the modern era of filmmaking from the 1970s onward. The Panavision C-Series watched Darth Vader face off against Obi-Wan in Star Wars. They followed Forrest Gump when he made his epic run across America. And this summer, they'll show us when Ethan Hunt saves the world in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. They have a very strong and particular look, owing to their unique counter-rotating astigmatizer design. This is a design Panavision pioneered in the 1960s, and it remains a staple of their entire anamorphic lineup. It results in the vertical axis breathing, the focus fall-off, and those extraordinary, beautiful flares. But you can't own a Panavision lens. You can only rent them directly from Panavision. Panavision's patent on this design expired long ago. Technically, anyone can manufacture an exact replica of the Panavision C-Series, or as close as they can figure out. But for a long time, no one did, due to the complexity of the optics and mechanics, the need for regular service to keep them in peak condition, and the relatively small size of the cinema lens market. You see, unlike a variable diopter or other common anamorphic focusing systems, counter-rotating astigmatizers are a bit of a mechanical nightmare. The spherical system must move in a linear fashion, while simultaneously two cylindrical components rotate in place in opposite directions, and not necessarily with linear travel on either system. It's a challenge to manufacture, generally making for a more expensive lens, and also creating a bigger headache for lens technicians. In short, they create some unique challenges which have caused manufacturers to stay away from them for the most part. But that's where a small Ukrainian company called Xelmus comes into the picture. Xelmus dared to go where others had not, and in 2020 officially launched their Apollo line. Basically, a modern clone of the epic Panavision C-Series design with some updates that make it even better for contemporary production environments, and we'll get to this in a minute. I had the chance to use a set of these lenses recently when a local colleague loaned his set to me. I really liked them, and after a lot of hand-wringing and back and forth, eventually I decided to bite the bullet and buy my own set. I'd been mulling over some kind of anamorphic lens purchase for a long time, and eventually landed here. So we're going to talk about how and why I did, and how I feel about it now. To begin with, I was lucky enough to get to survey a broad variety of lenses of all kinds over the years. My favorite lenses were always ones with really good close focus, whether spherical or anamorphic. I just can't stand using a diopter, and I usually prefer pretty tight framing, a nice out-of-focus background. Selective focus is something I'm really into. That constraint alone really limited the options in terms of anamorphic lenses. I long considered the Atlas lenses, both the larger Orions and the smaller Mercury lenses, but each one came with some kind of compromise. For the Orions, I wish they were a smidge lighter, a little bit higher resolution, and for the Mercuries, I wish they flared blue instead of amber, and I wish their breathing wasn't as pronounced as it is. But honestly, both the Orions and the Mercuries are great sets of lenses. I liked Laowa's Proteus lenses, but again, they're so heavy. I liked the Viltrox Epic lenses, but they really don't focus very close. And then there is Xelmus. They really just tick all the boxes. They're compact, fast, amazing close focus, and the best lens flares I have ever seen from any lens, period. I would talk these things over and over with my wife, and she made peace with our purchase decision long before I did. I'd still be dithering around, and she just kept telling me, just buy the Apollos, and eventually we did. I didn't buy these directly from Xelmus. This set is used, and I bought it from a brokerage service called New Life Cine. The company was founded by Matt Livingston, who created it specifically to connect buyers and sellers of high-end cinema equipment in a safe and trustworthy environment. He acts as both the broker and the escrow service. You buy a product, send the money to Matt, and he holds on to the money while the seller ships you the purchase, and upon your approval, he will release funds to the seller. He can also help you liaise with a financing company called Ascentium, which can turn your big ticket purchase into a stream of monthly payments if that's better for you. And Matt definitely offers what you would call high-touch customer service. I'm generally not too picky of a buyer, but this kind of high-ticket secondhand purchase was new for me, and I had quite a few questions throughout the process. Matt was really great about answering everything in a timely, friendly, thorough manner. I even met him in person at NAB show, and I just cannot say too many nice things about him. He's patient, he's kind, and he does a really great job trying to understand your particular needs as a buyer. You can find all kinds of wonderful gear listed on New Life Cine's website, from cameras to lenses and beyond. And Matt will personally guide you through the whole purchase process. If there's anything you've been looking for but you weren't sure how or where to take the plunge, New Life Cine is a fantastic option. And you don't even necessarily have to respond to a particular listing on the site. I reached out to Matt directly, just telling him what I was looking for generally, and he went to work finding the right lenses. He found me this absolutely stunning Xelmus Apollo A set, even complete with original boxes, at a price I was happy with. The set has some little cosmetic imperfections on the outside. I believe it was used in a rental environment pretty extensively, so that's to be expected. But the glass was in great shape, so I found a decent paint match at Home Depot and just touched up all the little nicks myself. But the big kicker here that sealed the deal for me is that this particular purchase included a full servicing of the entire set by the incredible folks at the Keep Camera. Now, that may not be the case for every purchase on the site, but it was here. The Keep is a lens servicing house founded by a gentleman named Mike Heibarger. Mike actually worked for many years at Panavision, and he may be the most knowledgeable independent lens technician on the planet when it comes to this kind of anamorphic optical system. Also, the Keep does a lot of really intricate work modifying and tuning lenses. The V35 project, which I've talked about before on this channel, those are custom-tuned lens sets designed and art directed by Dominic Barbaro at Northwest Camera Co. Then the actual optical and mechanical modifications are done by the Keep. You can see some of their exquisite work on Instagram, and I've left some links in the description. So Mike took my Apollos, opened them all up, and tuned each one to absolute perfection before sending them on to me. If you have any vintage anamorphic or higher-end anamorphic lens generally, and it's in need of service, I cannot recommend the Keep more strongly. And this part of the story is ultimately why I wanted to do another video about Xelmus. The set I used previously was lovely, and it was obviously enough for me to take the plunge and buy my own set, but getting a freshly serviced set has been another experience entirely. Resolution is noticeably improved. I can now shoot as wide as T2 in some cases, whereas before a 2:8:4 split was necessary almost always. Focus breathing is now perfectly vertical, whereas the set I used that wasn't quite in tune, it could go a little bit diagonally. Even the bokeh is a little bit nicer and slightly less busy than what I'd seen before. It's possible that the optics are slightly different in some ways. Xelmus is known to do some rolling updates without great documentation about them, but I know that some of this is down to the expertise of Mike Heibarger and the Keep. 2 out of the 3 lenses came back to me with better close focus than what is normal or specified for the lenses. The 40 and 100 each gained an entire inch on their close focus. The 40mm now focuses down to about 14 inches. Compare that to most anamorphic lenses, which struggle to reach double that figure. And now that I've really started to shoot with them, I'm noticing the particular characteristics of this optical design in a lot of film and TV content filmed on these similar Panavision lenses. I started rewatching Andor Season 1, filmed largely on Panavision C-Series. The opening shot of that series follows Cassian Andor as he's walking down some sort of causeway in the rain. Camera is pointed up and to the left at the overhead lights illuminating his path. Camera is tight on these lenses as each one enters and exits the frame. At first, we aren't sure what we're seeing. It almost looks like something rotating in place, and it isn't until camera pans over to Andor himself that we see the whole scene and understand what we just saw. But those lights exhibit exactly the kind of smearing, flare, glare element I'm talking about. And that's just one of a dozen little things these lenses do, which have been burned into our brains due to the past 50 years of collective filmmaking history. I guess in short, what I'm saying is something like that old saw, these lenses just make everything look like a movie. But hopefully you'll get a sense of what I mean when I say that. They have a very specific, unique look. A look which is an indelible part of some of the greatest films of all time. Most of the time when people say these lenses look like a movie, there are a dozen other options which would achieve the exact same result. But for what I'm describing, there really aren't any alternatives. You can rent from Panavision or you can buy from Xelmus. There's also Caldwell, but I think for the price, most folks are just going to rent from Panavision. The Caldwell lenses are like $34,000 each, and their close focus is only 2.5 feet. So, you're probably using diopters anyway, and you're on a larger production, etc. And there are rumors of some other astigmatizer lenses possibly coming to market in the near future, and I really do hope they come. The more the merrier. But at this moment, the only thing reasonably available to purchase with this look are these lenses. So how close a clone are these, and what are the pros and cons of Xelmus versus an actual Panavision lens? Well, that's where the CineLens manual comes back into our story. As I explored the purchase process on these lenses, I was going back and forth whether it was a good idea, and my amazing wife was just all for it and encouraging me to get them. But as we got closer to making the purchase and actually taking delivery, she bought me this extra little gift. I'd told her about this book before, and she had it waiting for me as a surprise. And this thing is just a gold mine of information and just incredibly fun to read. If you have any interest in the history of cinema or cinema lenses generally, it's a must-own thing. There's so much in here about all kinds of lenses, but lots about Panavision and the C-series specifically. And one thing that's really neat is because Panavision owns and services all their lenses, they also update them from time to time. The book describes that Panavision's anamorphic lenses were originally built around Cooke Speed Panchro spherical lenses. The Cooke glass served as the taking lens for the counter-rotating astigmatizer anamorphic block at the front, but as time has passed and these lenses have been serviced and modified over the years, sometimes elements or whole spherical blocks get replaced. Any given C-series lens you rent from Panavision today may have a substantially different look than it did back in the 1970s. Wild, right? So if we're talking about the C-series look, we might have to be a little bit more specific. To me, the core essence of the C-series, which has remained constant over time, is that it's a 2x stretch anamorphic with the following 4 attributes. Number 1, vertical breathing. This means that framing stays the same from side to side, and as you rack focus, the out of focus elements stretch vertically. This is something present in basically all of Panavision's anamorphic lenses, and it's a result of the counter-rotating astigmatizers. For this, Xelmus is a perfect check. Number 2, barrel distortion. Again, check. Each Xelmus has some, with more distortion towards the wider focal lengths. My set is a so-called V2 from Xelmus, and the 40mm has quite a bit of distortion. My understanding is that the newest lenses are V3, and they're just a little bit straighter. Xelmus has done some rolling updates, somewhat like Panavision. Personally, I am quite happy with the look I have on my lenses, and I wouldn't change it at all. In fact, this 40mm lens might just be my favorite single lens of all time. Although it does have some stiff competition from its 60mm big brother. Both of them are just amazing, amazing lenses, and I love each one more the more I use them. Number 3, focus fall off. On the Panavision C-series, the top and bottom 15% of the frame or so is always out of focus, no matter what. And again, Xelmus does this pretty much perfectly. It's just a result of the astigmatizer design. And number 4, the lens flares. And here I'm talking about complex, multi-layered blue flares with diagonal elements, veiling glare, something I call the smear flares, as I described with that shot from Andor. This one is perhaps the most famous of all of the C-series attributes. And what's important to remember is that a lens flare for any lens doesn't just appear when you have a flashlight pointed into camera. Lens flares are a complicated and nuanced thing. And what I care about are the finer details here. What happens when a strong source is pointing at the lens from just off camera? Or what if it's not quite a strong source? What if it's above the lens pointing down? How does flare behavior change as you change the size of the light source? What about a solid spotlight with a hard edge versus a soft light with a diffused blob? How does the lens flare look in bright environments versus darker ones? Many factors will play a role in how light dances around inside a lens and what it does to the image. Panavision C-series lenses do something very particular, and the Xelmus Apollo lenses are not a 100% replica in this regard. Xelmus really does have its own particular fingerprint in this way, but it's absolutely in the same neighborhood as Panavision's lenses. It's the only thing in that neighborhood other than Panavision and Caldwell, and personally, I love the way it looks. It's my favorite flare of any lens I've ever used, and although some folks feel like it flares too easily, I've come to really, really enjoy it. Sure, once in a while you might need to flag a light to keep things in check, but you just get so much interesting stuff here that I think it's worth the extra effort when you do need to do something to minimize the flares. On the other set I used, I did feel like the glare was a bit too much, but something about this set here is just a little bit different. Possibly it's a slightly updated optical design or a coating formula, I don't know. But what I have here, this makes me very, very happy indeed, even in heavily backlit situations, which was kind of the thing I was worried about the most. Okay, so we have here something of a very good replica of a Panavision lens, but the original C-Series was designed over 50 years ago. What's wonderful about Xelmus is a few things they've done to even improve on this classic design. Number one is their size and weight. These things are under 2 kilograms each, basically the same size and weight as my Arl primes. They aren't tiny by any means, but they're lighter than the Atlas Orion series and most other good 2x anamorphic lenses out there. Number two, full frame coverage. Most of the Xelmus lenses will cover open gate 3x2. Even the wider ones, which are sold as Super 35, they'll still cover the full height of a full frame camera and give you a 2:1 aspect ratio. And with the fresh service of these, I'm getting usable sharpness starting at about T2 on the 40mm and 60mm, and about T2.84 split on the 100mm, so you can get quite shallow depth of field, usually not something you can say about an anamorphic lens. And number three, and this was the big one for me, that amazing close focus. This whole set focuses to about 1.5 feet from subject, and that is incredible. The 100 is virtually a macro lens. Again, this lets you create shots that simply weren't possible before. And you can do it without a bag of diopters, using a lens that's considered very light for an anamorphic. Even modern alternatives like the Atlas Mercury, which are fantastic lenses by the way, they don't get this close. For me, that's a big reason I used to shy away from anamorphic lenses, is that I like getting close to my subject. And Xelmus found a way to make everything small, light, dazzling, and still get so close. So, like I mentioned up top, these lenses really changed some things for me. But what do I mean by that? Well, I used to look down a little bit on anamorphic lenses. I like high fidelity images. I like high resolution. I like vivid and vibrant colors. And anamorphic lenses sometimes mean a compromise in some of those areas. The Xelmus Apollos are the first lenses I've used, which really let me have my cake and eat it too. Probably the two biggest factors putting me off of other anamorphic lenses, again, were that close focus and the flares. There's not a lot out there which is both really interesting in terms of the look and has decent close focus and comes in under 6 pounds. I do really like the Mercuries, and if I ever want to expand my Apollo set with either a wider or longer option, there's a decent chance I will turn to the Atlas Mercuries to do so. But for now, just these 3 lenses will be getting a lot of rotation in my regular work, especially next week when I head back to this set to finish principal photography on my very first feature film. Big thanks to all the folks mentioned above. They're all doing great work, from Anamorphic Channel and Media Division, who are great entertainers and educators, to New Life Cine for offering an important niche service and providing outstanding customer service, to The Keep and Mike Heibarger for their unbelievable work maintaining these critical tools, and of course to Xelmus for daring to enter this particular corner of the market and absolutely nailing it. I'm crazy lucky to get to shoot on all this fun stuff, so of course the biggest thank you has to go to my wonderful, beautiful wife for being so enthusiastic and supportive and putting up with all my nonsense. Let me know if you have any questions about these lenses or any other anamorphic lenses I've mentioned above. I'll probably be slowing down on gear-related videos for a while. Coming up, it's going to be a lot of editing, color grading, audio, Foley, trailer, distribution, post-production kinds of things. So if you have anything in those areas you want to know about or see how I'm tackling, please let me know in the comments. It'll be a pretty busy time trying to get the film all buttoned up, so just tell me which parts interest you the most, and I'll be happy to try and make videos about it. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.